Under the blazing sun at Aurora Test Field, a murmur of excitement rolled through the crowd gathered for the new prototype's unveiling. Cameras flashed, reporters adjusted their mics, and the CEO, a confident woman in a tailored white suit, stood proudly beside the shining silver helicopter that reflected the midday light like a blade. A few steps away, a man in a faded jumpsuit wiped grease from his hands, his face half hidden beneath the brim of his cap. He looked out of place among the polished executives and engineers, just another mechanic in the background, invisible to most. But not for long. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories where fate rewards quiet strength, please take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe. You never know whose life your support might lift. No one really noticed him when the CEO, Evelyn Crane, laughed and said to her guests, "I'll marry whoever can make this thing fly today." The crowd chuckled. They thought it was just playful arrogance. After all, the prototype wasn't ready. Months of failed tests had proven that no one could get it off the ground. Engineers whispered excuses about power ratios and design faults. But the truth was simple. The helicopter had refused to fly. And today's test was more of a media stunt than an engineering milestone. Then a quiet voice came from behind the crowd. "Maybe it just needs the right hands." Heads turned. The man, the janitor, the mechanic, the single dad who fixed coffee machines and mopped oil spills, stepped forward. His name was Michael. Everyone knew him only by his first name, and even then, most forgot it moments later. Evelyn smirked. "You? Fly this." She tilted her head, amused. "Fly this helicopter, and I'll marry you." Laughter broke out like wildfire. The engineers, the assistants, even a few reporters joined in. It was meant as a joke, a cruel one. But Michael didn't laugh. He simply looked at the helicopter, his eyes distant, like someone remembering a ghost. Without a word, he walked toward it, climbed into the cockpit, and pressed his palm against the ignition panel. The laughter faded into silence when the system beeped and the display lit up. A line of text appeared on the screen. "Welcome back, Pilot ID. M. Hartley, Design Authorization confirmed." For a moment, no one moved. Evelyn's smile faltered. She took a step closer, her voice shaky. What did you just do?" Michael's hand tightened on the control stick. The blades began to turn, slicing the air with a rising hum that grew louder and stronger. Dust swirled around the onlookers. Within seconds, the machine that had defied everyone else lifted gracefully off the ground. The silver body gleamed as it hovered above them, stable, powerful, alive, and the man they had mocked, the janitor, the mechanic, the single father who came in before dawn and left long after dark, sat inside with calm focus, like he'd never left this seat before. Because he hadn't. He was the one who built it, years ago, before life took everything from him. Michael Hartley had been a name people knew. A talented engineer, he once led Aurora's top development team. He had dreams of creating machines that could fly higher, quieter, cleaner. But dreams didn't feed families. And when his wife fell ill and his daughter was just 3, he made the choice that ended it all. He sold his patents and walked away. The company took his designs, his credit, his future. He didn't fight back. He couldn't. He had a child to raise and hospital bills that never stopped coming. When his wife passed, he found work where he could, cleaning, fixing, anything that paid. Aurora's maintenance department didn't ask questions, and he didn't offer answers. He only asked to work nights so he could take his daughter, Lily, to school in the morning. She was his reason for everything. For waking up, for pushing on, for pretending that the man he used to be didn't matter anymore. But fate is strange. Sometimes it circles back. When Aurora announced their new helicopter project, Michael recognized his design instantly. The shape of the rotor blades, the unique control interface, even the way the cockpit curved, it was all his. But he said nothing. He just watched as others claimed it, failed at it, and mocked the man who'd built it with his own 2 hands. Until today, the helicopter hovered smoothly for a minute before Michael brought it down with perfect precision. The blade slowed, the dust settled, and silence stretched over the crowd. Then someone began to clap. 1, then 2, until the air filled with the sound of hands that didn't know whether they were applauding or apologizing. Evelyn's eyes were wide. She wasn't laughing anymore. She walked toward him as he stepped out, his boots crunching against the gravel. "Who are you?" she asked, Her voice barely above a whisper, he looked at her calmly. I'm the man who built your helicopter. The truth hit her harder than any humiliation could. The old project files, the buried credits, the forgotten name, everything came back. She had been a young executive when Aurora bought his design, and she'd never met the man behind it. But she'd read about him, the brilliant engineer who disappeared. She just never thought he'd end up sweeping her floors. That night, as the story went viral, Michael sat outside a small apartment with his daughter asleep inside. Reporters camped outside the building, but he ignored them. He didn't care about fame. All he wanted was peace. The company offered him his old job back, a promotion, a paycheck with more zeros than he'd ever seen. But he refused. I didn't fly that helicopter to prove anything, he said quietly. I did it to remind myself I still could. Evelyn visited him later that week. Not as a CEO, not as someone with power, but as a woman humbled by truth. She told him she'd had the company reinstate his patent credits and transfer all ownership rights back to him. You deserve this, she said. He smiled faintly. No, he replied, my daughter does. For the first time, Evelyn saw the quiet strength in his eyes. Not ambition, not bitterness, but purpose. And maybe, just maybe, she realized that true success wasn't in who stood highest, but in who stood longest when life tried to break them. Word spread quickly. The man once mocked for being a janitor became a symbol of resilience. People from all over wrote letters, engineers, dreamers, single parents, saying his story gave them hope. That maybe their hidden worth wasn't gone, just waiting for the right moment to rise again. Michael didn't chase interviews or attention. He went back to working with his hands, this time building a small flight training program for kids who couldn't afford fancy schools. If you can teach a child to believe in their own wings, he often said, you've already built the strongest machine there is. One afternoon, months later, Evelyn stood at the same test field, watching as a smaller, sleeker version of that helicopter lifted off, this time flown by a group of young students Michael had trained. She smiled, thinking of his words, and whispered, fly this helicopter and I'll marry you. It wasn't mockery anymore. It was admiration, respect, maybe even gratitude for a man who taught her what real greatness looked like. Michael never remarried. His daughter grew up, proud of the man her father was, not the titles he'd lost, but the dignity he kept. Whenever she asked him why he didn't stay at Aurora, he'd smile and say, because some flights aren't meant to be for crowds. They're just meant to be for the ones who believe in you. And every year, on the anniversary of that test flight, the local news would replay the clip. The moment a janitor turned inventor started the engine and silenced a world that had forgotten him. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that no one is truly forgotten, and that courage can rise from even the quietest souls, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps more stories like Michael's take flight. And before we end, tell us in the comments, would you have had the courage to start that engine, knowing everyone was laughing? Because sometimes, all it takes is one person who refuses to stay grounded to remind the world how high the human spirit can really soar.